So many people have told me how difficult it is to make friends as an adult. Once you're out of school, out of college, you don't have that built-in community anymore, and you might be around a lot of people, but it's really hard to connect and have genuine, lasting friendships. I'm gonna give you a detailed structure of how to start making friends as an adult, not only to meet them, but also to make them and to keep them. By them, I mean friends, the ones that you don't have yet. Recently, I have implemented this myself. I have friends, but I also wanted to find friends who are first-time moms like me, with babies at the same age as my baby. So I have started anew in this as well, and this is how I did it. The first step is the simplest, not necessarily the easiest, but going out and getting involved in the community. Go do things that you enjoy doing, that you want to spend time doing, that are meaningful to you. So it could be taking a flower arranging class, it could be volunteering at a food bank, it could be taking a sailing class, anything that makes you excited, and then you can meet other like-minded people, which is basic. You're probably like, I already know that, but it's also important to do things very local to yourself. So don't go like an hour away to do something. Find something that's like 5 minutes away from you, 10 minutes away from you, and try and keep it as close as possible. Because something that I found in the later stages when you're trying to keep friends, maintain the friendships, is if you're 5 minutes away, it's so much easier to just pop over and hang out, swing by and say hello. It's different for everyone, the threshold that's too much. Sometimes an hour seems very reasonable and normal to people. Sometimes 15 minutes seems like it's way too much time. But I'm just going to encourage you, get to know people who are in your really close by local vicinity. That will help your friendships last longer because there's a shorter barrier to maintain the relationship. So for example, when I was trying to meet new moms like myself, I went to an in-person birthing course. I met another friend at the grocery store, someone else from my church, someone else from a mutual friend, and the other one was at a breastfeeding support group. So those were things just locally that I was interested in, wanting to be involved in, and I just jumped in. So the second part of this structure is making the friends. You can be near the people, but then you have to make friends with the people around you. I think the biggest barrier to people finding friendships as an adult is not getting out of their comfort zone and not initiating an opportunity to hang out outside of where you're meeting. So let's say at my birthing course, we met multiple times with these 7 couples, and we've talked about things, shared experiences, but it would have been really easy for us to just all leave the course, never speak to each other again, because no one was gonna be like, oh, let's hang out, let's have our babies play together. But I did. At the end, I wrote down my name and my number, and I gave it to each of the couples and said, hey, if you guys want to do a play date after we have our babies, I'd love to connect. And 2 of the 7 people that I gave my number to reached out and said, yeah, let's hang out sometime. So you have to initiate an opportunity to hang out outside of wherever you are. You have to be the one to offer that. Some other examples, I was in the grocery store. Nobody talks to each other at the grocery store, or at least not very often. But I saw another mom who had a stroller walking around, and I was like, she's in a similar life stage. I'm gonna go ask her how she's doing. So I just said, hey, how's it been? How old's your baby? And we just stayed connected after that. At the breastfeeding group, we were all just in a circle. You could kind of just mingle. I physically went over to one of the moms who had a younger baby like mine and just talked to her. And I actually didn't initiate in that moment. It's when I saw her again in the parking lot, I was like, oh, hey, why don't we get together sometime? So I think in every case but one, I initiated. One time when I met a mutual friend, she was the one who was like, oh, let's get together sometime. But I still had to make the choice to respond, give her my number, accept the invitation. So it just takes action and usually initiative. Okay, so we've gotten through the first two sections: finding people, making friends, starting that initiation, and then keeping friends. Sometimes one friend is more interested in hanging out regularly than the other. And by more interested, I mean interested in hanging out more frequently. Frequency can be a big roadblock if you don't communicate about it, because if someone is less available than the other, it can feel like they're not actually interested in hanging out, but they are. They just have a different bandwidth. So keep an eye out for that. Communicate about it if it seems like you guys don't match. Sometimes someone is not interested in hanging out, and that's okay. Gotta let those ones go. But sometimes there is genuine interest, and you guys just have a different bandwidth for frequency of hanging out. Flaws. Everybody has them. Sometimes I think we're waiting for the perfect friend, and there isn't one. I would actually say the perfect friend is someone who is flawed and they know it, and they're willing to talk about it, and they're willing to apologize when they've offended you. You're hopefully willing to apologize if you've offended them. I would say have an attitude before going into it that you expect the flaws to be there and you're ready to work through the messiness of that. So if someone offends you, tell them kindly and seek to reconcile. I think that's actually something that builds depth in relationships and makes them longer lasting, more intimate, and more authentic. Choose to have deeper, more meaningful conversations. I feel like a lot of times people are just stating what happened and what's going on. They're not talking about how they feel, how they're growing, their hopes and dreams, deeper, more vulnerable subjects. And if you want to have lasting relationships, go beyond the surface, it's more risky. You're going to have more misunderstandings. You're going to have more times when you make the other person uncomfortable potentially. That will build depth and breadth in your friendships. Focus on love in your friendships. Love is sacrificially giving for the good of another, even if you don't receive something in return. If you approach all of your friendships with love, they will flourish more than if you don't. Consider the idea of investing in friendships where you might be giving more than you're receiving, and maybe significantly more, or maybe a little bit more. I have found my relationships to flourish more when I'm giving to bless others and not necessarily worried about whether they're blessing me in return. Investing in friendships that aren't necessarily going to be all about you. Show up. That's very basic. Be reliable. Follow through with what you're going to say you're going to do. But I also mean showing up as in, if someone had a tragic event or is going through a hard time, help them through the time, like just be there and be present. That is something that is really meaningful to receive when you're going through a hard time. It's so helpful for others to receive that, and I feel like that really builds lasting bonds and trust and appreciation between people. So if you feel like your relationships aren't flourishing, they're not going anywhere, there might be ways that each of you can show up in a meaningful way for each other that can enrich and move the friendship forward. Another thing to enrich your relationships is to share meals together or share food together. I feel like even if you're hanging out for a non-meal event, like bring snacks, bring donuts, bring drinks. I really feel like food enriches our time together and it endears people to each other. There's something about breaking bread together that is more meaningful than the same event without food. By implementing this, I now have 5 first-time mom friends who all have babies the same age as my baby. And that's because I went through this process freshly to find new people that I wanted to hang out with. And I'm glad that I did. You can do it too. Don't be discouraged if 90% of the people you try to hang out with don't end up being your friend. If 10% or 1% of them work out, then that's a victory. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.